At a Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee hearing on June 24th, Congress convened to talk about digital assets and how best to create a regulatory framework. Leaders from corporate America and academia, including Coinbase and the University of Pennsylvania, were invited to testify. Senator Loomis started her line of questioning asking Sarah Hammer, executive director at the Wharton School, about fraud.
As we in the United States continue to have a lack of clarity with regard to our regulatory framework, are we inviting fraudulent actors away from jurisdictions that have more regulatory clarity?
I do think by not enacting a regulatory framework that the United States does leave the door open for fraudulent activity. And as I mentioned earlier in my testimony, I believe that a regulatory framework can enhance and enable innovation, and it can enhance and enable responsible innovation. So a couple of other thoughts on that. One is that, as I'll speak to, and as is found in my written testimony, the other jurisdictions that I have studied that have enacted comprehensive digital asset frameworks have placed a great emphasis on fraud prevention, clarity of compliance obligations, anti-money laundering requirements, and anti-terrorist financing requirements. And in doing so, they have made it clear and enabled organizations to better comply with their regulatory frameworks. I feel that that is an essential component of the regulatory framework here in the U.S. The second thing is engagement in the international standard-setting community. And by that, I mean the United States leadership in the international community. That coordination and collaboration across the globe is critical to fraud prevention, anti-crime, anti-money laundering, and anti-terrorist financing. I believe strongly that the United States can take a great step forward by enacting a framework that clarifies obligations, that makes it clear to organizations what is required, and can provide leadership in the international community in this space.
When it was Senator Moreno's turn, he asked the witnesses about what the U.S. can do to regain the lead.
How much time do we have to regain leadership in America? And what's the price of failure in your mind? Start with Mrs. Hammer, go down the line.
Thank you, Senator. We need to act now. I believe that the U.S. is far behind other jurisdictions in terms of enacting a regulatory framework. And as my data shows in the written testimony, while we have had a lead in digital assets, others are rapidly catching up to us and perfectly poised to surpass us. We have to act now.
And what's the price of failure? Like, what does failure look like if we don't do anything, if we get mired in inaction?
Thank you, Senator. The price of failure is that we will have criminal activity, illicit activity in digital assets, fraud. We will have a more difficult time enforcing our rules and regulations, and we will have expensive, costly, time-consuming regulation by enforcement.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Not surprisingly, I also agree that the time to act is now. And I would say that there are two significant costs that come from not acting now. As Ms. Hammer has pointed out, other jurisdictions are acting. And we saw the cost of that in global data protection, where more onerous rules coming from Europe and the GDPR regime have created, frankly, problems and liability concerns for internet commerce more broadly. We don't want the same thing to happen with the digital asset ecosystem. We want the rules to be created and be imbued with the DNA of American commercial practice, legal practice, and policy focus. The second cost is the economic one. And ownership of technology has been the great hallmark of America in the 20th century and the initial part of the 21st century. It was from the steam engine to the internet, but we faltered in the last 10 years. We've been behind on technologies like 5G. We've lost our silicon manufacturing capability, which started here and migrated abroad. We do not want to do the same with the next generation of the internet that has the possibility to transform not just financial transactions, but consumer transactions and how information flows.
Senator, I'll take you down the regulator's point of view. I think I was a commissioner in the first Trump administration. I think wrote an op-ed in 2018 or 2019 saying we needed, a change in statute. And that was by virtue of the observations I had made at the commission back then, and then as chair in the Biden administration. Obviously, we heard about the entrepreneurial, innovative side, but from a regulatory enforcement standpoint, too much fraud, too much manipulation out there, constituents across the country getting hurt. I think in our fiscal year 2024 enforcement program, the CFTC's enforcement docket, 50% of it, near 50% of it was crypto related, which is an astonishing number for a market that the agency doesn't regulate. So gives you some sense of how much fraud is potentially going out there that the agency is just unable to identify or see because there's no traditional regulatory authority. So certainly the time to act is now.
For more Congress clips, stay right here, and thanks for watching.